Airhead BMWs are a little bit strange. These motorcycles absolutely have a dedicated cult following, but unlike the majority of vintage motorcycles that people keep around and talk about to this day, CB750, Yamaha RZ500, Harley-Davidson XR750, maybe a Vincent Black Shadow, those were all bikes that were known for being fast, being competitive in racing, and the Airhead was never that. So what gives? To be fair to these bikes, there was the R90S, and that motorcycle was absolutely, without a doubt, a beast for its day. And yeah, it was used in a little bit of racing and it did okay. That being said, racing is really not what Airhead BMWs are known for. If anything, these bikes were more so comfortable, daily rideable, and reliable sport tourers. This particular 1975 BMW R75/6 belongs to my fiance. Been featuring her bikes quite a bit, so thank you. And this motorcycle we got for not very much money because it's been a little modified, turned into a cafe racer, and she likes the look of it. That's all that matters. I think it looks pretty decent too, though it is fun to have a factory original bike. But this motorcycle, not being an R90S, being an R75/6, is not the 900 beast. It's a 750, and peak horsepower with this 750 is about 50 horsepower and 44 pound-feet of torque. That's a decent torque figure for the day, but 50 horsepower from a 750 versus a CB750 of this same era at about 68 horsepower, that's a pretty big difference.
This motorcycle was not nearly as exotic as a lot of the Japanese and British bikes of the time. Now, it was more so a good bike to do long distances with, though this was still a motorcycle that you could have a lot of fun on. And that might seem counterintuitive, but really on these, it made a ton of sense. The first thing that you notice about this bike is the motor. It's got a very aircraft or maybe almost watch-like feel to it. It feels like a precision-engineered piece of equipment, very fine-tuned. So it's a cool thing to operate, but it's more of a low-end torque kind of powertrain.
As you would expect, this engine is a horizontally opposed boxer twin. 750cc, like I said, and two Bing carburetors, one on each side. The other interesting thing is that you've got a petcock on each side of the tank as well, though the choke is controlled from just one lever. Another nice piece of engineering on this motorcycle is the shaft drive. Very durable and great on a sport touring bike, but because of that shaft drive, you can't have a very wide tire because it would run into that shaft. So this is about as wide as you can go, and it's pretty skinny. Though this particular bike is a little bit stripped down into a cafe racer, they did maintain the center stand, and that's great on any touring bike. It helps with maintenance, and it's just a good kickstand, but it's especially necessary on these boxer motors. And if you look, the side stand that you can use on this bike is terrible. And I've been told that they actually did that on purpose. If you try and put this center stand down and take your foot away as you're leaning the bike over, it comes right back into place. So you have to do kind of an odd little dance with this kickstand where you get it down, set the bike onto it, and roll it back a little bit to keep the kickstand there. If you're just going to jump off the bike momentarily, you can use this, but you really want to use the center stand instead, because that way you're not going to have oil trying to drain its way out of the bottom end and into the top end of this downhill cylinder.
Peak power on this motor is around 6,000 RPM, unlike 8,500 RPM on my CB750. So it's not a rev-happy motorcycle as much, but even from low RPM, you get a nice wave of torque coming from under the seat. So it makes it a very easy bike to ride, not one that you have to downshift quite as often. And if you're riding long distances, that's nice because it can make the bike a little less taxing. The other thing that makes it a nice motorcycle to ride is the suspension. Very cloud-like. If you've never been on one of these old Airheads, you might think, oh, the suspension is blown out. And while it does feel that way, these bikes, at least all of them I've ridden, are always very soft. Even though these motorcycles do have a very soft suspension, they're still able to corner surprisingly well. Once you get them into a turn, you would think that the suspension being so soft would keep you from cornering hard, but age considered, this was a decent handling bike for the time. One thing that does keep this motorcycle from being the ideal touring bike for a lot of people is that it's not really an option, or not an option at all, to do forward controls, because where you would put forward controls, well, there's motor there. So yeah, you're not really gonna put pegs up there. So it's not a touring bike for everybody, but if you don't mind mid controls, it's a good motorcycle to hit a lot of miles with, as many people did.
Now, much of this bike is very narrow, but the engine, because of its configuration, is very wide, and naturally the cylinders are offset. The stranger thing though, and you don't really feel it so much, or at least I don't when I'm riding it, is that the foot pegs are offset as well. One of the reasons these Airheads have such a following is because they can consistently find themselves at very high miles with pretty minimal maintenance. I actually did a video with an R90 that had 140,000 miles from our old coworker Brendan, and that is not unusual for these bikes at all. I've heard stories of them hitting 300,000 miles, and if you come from the car world, 300,000 miles, that's a lot, but maybe not unheard of. On a motorcycle, that's a ton of miles. Airheads are dirt simple. If you know how to work on them, you can keep them going forever. And that is one of the reasons that these were not only popular back in the day when they were brand new and they were running perfectly because of that, but to this day, they've still got a following for that reason.
Another strange thing about these motorcycles when they're running is that since this isn't a transverse engine, like most bikes, it's longitudinal. When you rev it, the bike kind of wants to lean over to the right. So it takes a little getting used to, but it's one of the things that gives this motorcycle unique character. This particular Airhead we got for not a lot of money. It was very cheap, and it is my fiance's bike, so I'm trying to ride it relatively gingerly. But these are great motorcycles, one that I've grown very fond of. And way back in the day, it's ancient history now, but I used to work at a motorcycle shop, and we had on consignment for sale an absolutely beautiful Airhead that was in great condition, very low mileage, and had all of its factory fairings and seats and everything just the way I would like it. And man, is that a fun bike, and I wished that I could buy it because it was quiet, it was refined, it was comfortable, a nice, pleasant motorcycle to ride. Unlike my CB750, which I love, but it's kind of a howling, hot, high revving, not the most comfortable motorcycle in the world. So jumping on one of these, for me, can be a big breath of fresh air. And lastly, I want to say a quick thanks to Scott and the team over at Rider Justice. We've been working with them for a long time because they love motorcycles, they love vintage bikes, and they understand riders. And because of that, they're great to work with. Scott, he's the man, and his team, they'll help you out no matter where you are in the country. If you're ever in an incident on 2 wheels or 4, make sure you call Scott first, and their link is in the description below.
While a lot of vintage motorcycles are popular because they had a land speed record, a top speed record, or some motorsports racing history, these motorcycles are popular for a very different, but still a very good reason. And some of these models are relatively affordable. You can find yourself a decent Airhead in the $3,000 to $8,000 range. There are some models that are gonna cost even more than that, like a nice R90S. But you can still find yourself a really great BMW that's a blast to ride for, again, a relatively affordable price. If I was shopping for one myself, I might look for something like, well, an R90S if I've got the money, or an R75/5 because I like some of these /5s, more old school characteristics, especially that instrument that's built into the headlight. But one way or another, if you get yourself on one of these old boxers, you really can't go wrong. These are great motorcycles. If you've never ridden one, you owe it to yourself to do so. And that's all for this video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you have any stories, any experiences with Airheads? Please share them, and we'll see you next time.